The term Evo Devo means Evolutionary Developmental Biology, and it's been a huge advance. It's something which greatly intrigues me and greatly excites me in some ways. Evo Devo does powerfully support, I think, common descent, because it shows that the same gene circuits, the same developmental processes, things like Turing reaction type mechanisms, are used universally in living systems. And for instance, the development of a fin of a fish and the development of a tetrapod limb utilizes a lot of the same gene circuits, and so they're used over and over again. So I think that in fact it does suggest common descent. However, once again, these developmental pathways which have been revealed, and this is a great advance, I have to say, it just throws very, very little light, I would argue hardly any at all, on how these pathways came about. In other words, we now know that some of the developmental underlying pathways behind the limb. But then that's just pushing back the problem into a more distant past. You now have to, if you want to give a fully Darwinian explanation for these underlying patterns which generate the homologies in nature, you've got to show that these things are adaptive, these patterns are adaptive, and some of them are extraordinarily difficult to explain in those sorts of terms. I'll give you an example. There is a developmental module, one of these revealed by Evo Devo studies, which shows that the size of the phalanxes in the finger decrease as you go from a proximal to a distal direction. In other words, if you look at your own fingers, you can see that the bones are getting increasingly smaller. This is a conserved developmental pathway, right? And you know how it is done? It's done because the proximal segment of the finger represses the growth of the successive one, and so forth, down the finger. This is recently reported and proceeded in the National Academy of Science. But certainly trying to envisage how such a developmental module was put together for some adaptive significance is fantastically difficult. Not just one example of the sort of revelations of Evo Devo. Evo Devo supports common descent, but it provides no additional evidence, no evidence at all for the Darwinian adaptational framework.